A big welcome to Hamza. It's a great honor and pleasure that you're joining us this evening from Berlin. And you were brought to us because you and Rob actually met. Rob, tell us how the two of you actually got to meet each other.
So, Howard, what actually happened was that I was very privileged to be an invitee to a study trip in Poland in August. It was hosted by the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, led by Tali Nates, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center out of Vienna, led by Daniel Schuster. And it was a trip comprising of Holocaust educators and peace activists, literally from around the world. And one of the people who I befriended on the trip was Hamza. We spent many hours sitting at the back of the bus and in hotel lobbies late at night talking about many different issues across the world. Obviously, a lot relating to the current conflict in the Middle East. And I found Hamza to be a person of great integrity, quality, and dignity. And coming back to South Africa, I carried on my relationship with Hamza. And I'd like to think that it's a relationship that will carry on post our trip. And I thought, Howard, that, having listened to many of your shows, that I thought that this would be a most interesting webinar for you to host.
So, Hamza, in the middle of a war between the Palestinian people and the Israeli people, you decide to go to Poland to learn about the Holocaust. What drove that decision, and what did you learn when you were there?
It's actually a good question because when the invitation actually came to me, I was hesitant, to be honest. I was hesitant to go or not. And yeah, I was thinking already before the invitation come to learn more about the Holocaust and maybe do a visit to Poland and to Auschwitz and other places. But when the invitation came, I was hesitant because of the timing. I was hesitant of who is inviting me also because I didn't know back then or at the beginning who was inviting me. But I thought about it. I thought about it for a few days before I said yes. And I think the main idea that popped up on my mind when I was thinking about that is that when I recognize other people's pain, that doesn't deny my people's pain, and that by no means says that I'm okay with the war happening in Gaza, but I'm someone who wanted to learn. I'm someone who wanted to learn about the history of the people who are sharing the land with him. And I was waiting for this opportunity. So when it came, I couldn't say yes. And yeah, that was actually what drove me, is just the belief that when I recognize other people's pain, that doesn't negate mine. And when I learn more about the people whom I'm supposed to share the land with, that will make it much easier for me.
And what did you experience when you were there?
Well, actually, I learned lots of things, to be honest, because I was ignorant. I was ignorant about the Holocaust and what Hitler did. Like I had some abstract ideas, but I was not that informed about the details. And one of the situations actually that stuck with me is when we were walking with our tour, and we were seeing the belongings of the Jews who took their bags, their pots, every their living stuff. And I felt a bit weird when I asked, when I realized that, okay, those people were being transported to concentration or extermination camps, but why are you taking your glasses, bags, and all your stuff with you? And I remember when I asked our tour guide, he responded to me and he said, because those people were also being sold a false hope of having a better future in these other places, that you are going to work, that you are going to have another life in another place. And that is stuck inside me, how hard it is to not only be cruel and kill and exterminate people, but also to sell them this idea of false hope before doing that. So I learned many stuff about how the levels of cruelty, and what dehumanization and demonization and unchecked hatred ends up with.
So, Hamza, can we start almost your story at the beginning? Because we'd love to know a little more about you growing up, about your family. You don't come from a particular political family at all.
Yes, actually, I come from a family that is not politically affiliated inside the Gaza Strip. And unfortunately, you cannot avoid politics inside the Gaza Strip. So I grew up in a very good neighborhood, a Rimal neighborhood of Gaza. But I had to go through many different levels of indoctrination inside the Gaza Strip, starting from my first school, which was named Dar al Arqam, which is not an ordinary school. It's a religious school inside the Gaza Strip. It was owned and controlled by Hamas. So I had to receive this indoctrination at a very early levels to listen to the jihadi songs before going to our classes in the start of our school day, and to have to memorize the Quran. I memorized, I think, third of the Quran when I was 10 or 11 years old. And after this school, I went to normal schools. Then for me to start thinking about religion at the I think at the age of 18, but then I had to go to the Islamic University of Gaza, which is also Hamas's ideological stronghold. And also in this university, the indoctrination continued, but deep inside myself, I was this agnostic guy who was not interested about religion, but it wasn't an option for me. In this university, no matter what was your specialization, you will study Sharia law, fiqh law, you will be a perfect imam after you go out of this university. And beside you studies every militant and every leader of Hamas. There's Yahya Sinwar studied, Ismail Haniya, every one of Hamas studies in this university. So I had to face this indoctrination at the same time, to have the belief inside myself that I'm just here for learning, not to be part of it. Now, was that easy? It wasn't, because of Gaza's economical situation and the hardships, and how Hamas managed to make the Gaza society of two layers of the wealthy elite of Hamas's members, leaders, and supporters, and the vast majority of Gaza who are just struggling to earn their living. And I was part of those. But with this, I couldn't go with the normal life in Gaza because, as I said, Hamas controlled every aspect of our life in Gaza, talking about kindergartens, schools, universities, to jobs in Gaza, because it was a requirement if you want a job in the public sector to be part of Hamas's party. And I wasn't. So I was invited many times in the university to join Hamas and to and some of these economical benefits, whether I'm talking about a job, a car, or apartment, and the list goes on. Thankfully, I didn't, and I continued until in 2019, I joined the We Want to Live movement, social movement inside the Gaza Strip that had two goals. One is to have some economical improvement in Gaza and to have elections. This was our way to say we want to overthrow Hamas, but in a polite way, because we didn't dare to say that out loudly. When we took the streets in March 2019 in Jabalia, in northern Gaza, I was arrested like many others. Actually, we were around 1,000 people who were arrested in just a few days. Those who even ran from Hamas, they stormed our houses, including mine, to take our phones, our laptops, and I was tortured in Hamas's slaughterhouses for 3 weeks until my family managed to pay a bribe to one of Hamas's officials and get me out of that prison. But this
So
experience, yeah.
if I can stop you there for a moment, how did they know who was there? Were there informers? How did they know who was participating in these We Want to Live movements?
Actually, they were smarter to the extent that they put in some undercover members inside the protest, and they were already informed that a protest is going to take a place, though we did not publish about it online. But of course, they have always informants inside the Gaza Strip, so they knew about it, and they were ready. The number of police cars that came to the Al Trans Street in Jabalia, where I was I think more than 10. And all the journalists and the social media activists who were known to be aligned with this movement were later arrested from their homes. So for those who don't know, Hamas always keeps informants inside the Gaza Strip. We in Gaza we call them Zannana. Zannana is a Hamas informant who will be most probably living in your neighborhood, reporting to Hamas on the activities against them. And they have one of those people in every neighborhood inside the Gaza Strip.
So they arrest you, they throw you in jail. Tell us what happens when you're in jail.
Yes, I was in jail, and immediately the accusations came that I am part of a foreign plot to overthrow Hamas, that I work with Israel's Shin Bet, and then they started asking me about officers' names. And then they searched into my phone, into my laptop. They didn't find anything. Then they accused me of working with the Palestinian Authority. And for those who don't know, this is a crime in Hamas's declaration. Working with the Palestinian Authority is a crime that you can get punished, tortured, or sometimes executed for it. The same way what happened to my friend Isam Safin, who was accused of collaborating with the Palestinian Authority, tortured until he died in Hamas's jails. Anyway, I was
So,
tortured.
sorry, if we just for those people watching who may not know, so the Palestinian Authority is run by the supporters of Fatah, um, and in fact, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, they killed many of the Fatah supporters and Fatah government people by throwing them off buildings.
Yes, and one can talk about the Palestinian Authority's popularity in the Palestinian street, but it's the official representative of the Palestinians outside. So they are accusing us of working with our government. You can imagine to what level they went. And I was tortured, accused of working with Israel, working with the Palestinian Authority, later with the Emirates. And they didn't find anything. They didn't find anything that proves any of that, because the vast majority, or I think most all of us, were not affiliated to anyone. We were just desperate people who wanted just a better situation for Gaza. Thankfully, I was released after paying a bribe. After 3 weeks, those who did not manage to pay the bribe stayed there for months, if not years.
How much is a bribe?
The first time it was $3,000, and $3,000 is a big money in Gaza, because we are talking about a monthly salary of 300 to 400 US dollars a month. So it was a big money for us. Anyway, I kept my head down after I was released, because I didn't have the same courage. I didn't feel that I have the appropriate support to do these activities. But I couldn't sustain that in 2023, a few months before the war. And we decided to take the streets again against Hamas. That was in June. And we were not naive people. We knew that we cannot overthrow Hamas with our bare hands. But our hope was that the international community, the NGOs, the human rights organizations, media outlets would listen, report, and support us in our journey to overthrow Hamas. Unfortunately, this was not the reality. I was also arrested in June, and I was tortured heavily the second time by Hamas, because for them I was quote unquote convicted criminal who participated in a previous protest, and I had to stay in a cell alone. I don't want to go much through the torture, but I can just tell you that there is no limits. There is literally no limits to what can happen to one of in Hamas jails. Thankfully, my family managed to pay another bribe to get me out, and it was higher this time, because it depends on how many times you are being jailed. The second time was $5,000 for my family, and that was too much for my father, that he couldn't afford it. And that was the moment when I decided that I lost hope in Gaza. I lost hope that anyone is interested in the society that is trying to overthrow Hamas. I lost hope with the countless media, NGOs, Palestinian Authority, and the list goes on, of those who claim to support us but just disappeared these days. So I took the decision, and I left Gaza, and from Gaza to Turkey, and from Turkey I took one of these immigration or death boats actually, and made my way to Greece. And yeah, 1 month after I arrived to Greece, October the 7th happened.
So before we get on to what happens on October the 7th, just help us, for example, go through what were your views of Israel at this time? Have you ever been to Israel?
I have never been to Israel. It's actually not an easy process for a Palestinian from Gaza to go either to Israel or even the West Bank. You have to go through many security checks, and Israel's security checks are very strict. If your cousin of a Gazan was involved with a militia, you will not be allowed. And in my case, it was, yes, the cousin of a cousin who I never saw in my life, actually. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but my views about Israel changed actually through my life. I was all the time this anti-Israel. I was even anti-Semite, radical Gazan who dreamed of Israel disappearing. I wouldn't say killing or death because no, that was never my views. But I dreamed of this disappearing. That I will just wake up in this day and Israel will not be there. But these views had to change, and I think mostly it changed after my first imprisonment in 2019. And I started to open my eyes and start seeing the conflict from another angle, from the Israeli angle. And also, I started to read much about Islamism, and it took me a journey from 2019 to 2023 to have the views that I'm having today.
So, can we get some background about Hamas? Where does it come from? Help us understand what Gaza is like, what Hamas is like. Where did they come from? How did they get into power? Give us kind of the background for those people who are not immersed in the subject.
Yes, so Hamas is political Islamist movement that was found in the late 80s, and it did not have much popularity among the Palestinian society until the Oslo Accords happened. And when the Oslo Accords happened was the first peace treaty between Palestinians and Israelis. And on this period, Hamas started to receive massive support from the Iranian regime, who was opposing this peace treaty between the Palestinians and the Israelis. For the Iranian regime, the idea of peace in Palestine means disappearing Israel or eliminating Israel. So they were supporting Hamas on the hope that Hamas can destroy this peace treaty between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And they tried with marching, I forgot the English, smearing campaigns against parts of the Palestinian Authority who signed until the second Intifada happened and Hamas became more popular because of the suicide bombings, the bombing in Israel, in school buses, in cafes, in bars, and the list goes on. So this was the legacy of Hamas, and they continued to make this agenda, trying to get the society's support sneakily as every political Islamist movements through charity projects. So they started to do charity in Gaza, trying to help the poor families, but that all came with a concession. All of that came with a sort of support that Hamas wanted, whether it was they were giving people some money, some food aids, even some education, support for the poor families in Gaza, trying to take their support. Then they took up the mosques in Gaza. And for those who don't know, the Gazan society is a religious society. So the mosque and Islam for the Gazans is a very important topic. And Hamas started taking over these mosques, giving a religious speech about Israel that praying every Friday to the destruction of Israel, to the elimination of the Jews. And that continued until Israel evacuated the last settlements in Gaza in 2005, and Hamas managed to portray that as a victory they achieved, not a unilateral evacuation from the Israeli side. And that got them more popularity among the Palestinians who saw them, quote unquote, liberating the Palestinian lands until the 2006 elections happened. And as you know, and I think for those who don't know, the Palestinian Authority was very famous for its massive corruption. So the people in Palestine were looking for an alternative, and Hamas was trying to be this alternative with its political slogans. You know that our one of their political slogans was "Our hands are clean," trying to say that we are not as corrupt as the Palestinian Authority, and the list goes on. And because of the nature of the Palestinian election system, where the Palestinian Authority or Fatah as a party can go either as a one umbrella of Fatah or individual campaigns. And because of the corruption, the people from Fatah started going individually in individual campaigns, while Hamas went in one umbrella. So Hamas got, I think, 48 support, while the while Fatah got less than that. So they took the victory of Gaza, but it was just parliamentary election. That wasn't enough for Hamas. So they were ready with their militant and started their coup, violent coup against the Palestinian Authority, throwing people from roofs, dragging them with motorcycles, executing. I remember in my neighborhood, one of the Fatah guys was shot more than 30 bullets by Hamas. It was a barbaric act, very similar to October the 7th, but back then the victims were actually Palestinians from the Fatah party. That was the legacy of Hamas.
And the average Gazan, like since then, does Fatah have support there? Does Hamas still have majority support? If you were kind of to dipstick in today and tell us what Gazans think of Hamas, would it Hamas have overwhelming support within Gaza?
Before answering you about the support that Hamas has right now, I will go back to the support that Hamas had on October the 6th. So if you ask a Palestinian from Gaza about support for Hamas, they distinguish between two faces of Hamas. One is Hamas as a government and one Hamas as a militia, because Hamas was both in Gaza. If you ask them about Hamas as a government, the vast majority of Gazans and even militant from Hamas don't support it as a government because it failed on every level as a government, massively corrupt. They didn't build a single school for the Gazans during 18 years. They didn't build a single hospital. Everything was built was with donations, money from European capitals. On the other hand, Hamas as a militia or as the idea of armed resistance, quote unquote armed resistance, was vastly supported by the Gazans. People believe that Hamas is the protector of the Palestinian, the group that will liberate Palestine, if one can say. And I think there is many reasons to that, because they were looking on the other way, or what Hamas was selling to them is by saying, look at the Palestinian Authority. They accepted peace with Israel, and look what the settlers are doing. The government is taking more settlements. But because we are here in Gaza, Israel left Gaza, and they will not have settlements, we will not have settlers. So they were selling this idea to the people, and the people believed in it. The people believed that Hamas was protecting them. Now, going to the situation now on the ground, Hamas is not supported both as a government, as a militia, because people stopped believing in Hamas as an idea of armed resistance. They saw with their own eyes how during 2 years of war inside the Gaza Strip and 500 kilometers of tunnels, Hamas did not allow a single Palestinian child to hide or to protect himself from the airstrikes during the war, except for sure for the two children of Yahya Sinwar and his wife, who were filmed hiding in one of these tunnels. They saw how Hamas was taking them as a human shields, firing from next to their homes, how they were stealing the humanitarian aid, how they were torturing and executing the Gazans. So the idea of armed resistance was broken to the Gazans, and I think that in any elections in Gaza, Hamas would never have a support among the Gazans. But the problem is the lack of an alternative. Because yes, we don't want Hamas in our future. Netanyahu says that he won't allow the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, but he doesn't say who he wants to run Gaza. He doesn't say who is an accepted ruler of Gaza in the post-war, because he lacks he lacks a detailed plan. I think he lacks a clear vision of how Gaza will be after the war.
So you mentioned the tunnels a few moments ago. Before you left, and you leave shortly before the 7th of October 2023, before you left, what did you know about Hamas plans? Did you know there was this 1,000 kilometers or 500 kilometers of tunnels underneath Gaza? Is that kind of common knowledge that everyone knew about? Did you know about command centers under hospitals or schools that led into tunnels? What did the average Gazan actually know about the situation?
I mean, talking about the depth and the uh, how complicated is Hamas's tunnel system, I don't think I was that like like many others in Gaza, we were not that informed about it because Hamas always keeps in their heads that Israel has informants in Gaza and they will never share such information with us publicly because they are afraid that this information will end up with Israel's security. But actually, after 2021 and in 2021, Yahya Sinwar, after the escalation, went publicly and said that they have 500 kilometers of tunnels. And when I watched this, I thought he's a stupid propagandistic who's just trying to exaggerate Hamas capabilities. I didn't believe it, though he said it himself. And to tell you if Gazans knew where the tunnels are, no, I don't think that Gazans or the ordinary Gazan knows where exactly the tunnels are. And the example for that is me myself, because in 2021, during the escalation between Hamas and Israel, it was located in my neighborhood, in Al neighborhood. And one of the days when I was sitting with my friends, yes, I was sitting with my friends, just playing some cards, trying to spend some time because everything stops during a military escalation, jobs and everything. And one of my friends left me and went to his home. 10 minutes later, I went to my home and I sat, and the bombardment started literally in my street. And yeah, this dear friend was Dr. Ayman Abu Auf, who was killed back that day with a dozen of children from the Contana family in Gaza. Anyway, after the bombardment, we went to the street to see what Israel was bombing. And we saw the big holes in our streets, and we realized what we were sitting above. But I would tell you that we never had an idea that there is such a tunnels underneath our houses. Actually, if we knew, we would have never stayed there. Because we also know that when there is an escalation, Israel will bomb these tunnels. So we would have not stayed there. If you are asking about the hospitals, we assume that. We always assume that once a war starts, you will find Hamas's leadership in the hospitals. That was like, yeah, that was just common sense in Gaza.
So if we fast forward to the 7th of October, where are you on the 7th of October?
On the 7th of October, I was sitting in Samos refugee camp in Greece. I was just arrived, I arrived there in September and I stayed until October the 7th happened.
And I presume you've got access to a radio or television or your phone, and you see what's your first reaction?
Actually, I still remember waking up very early that day because of the voice in the room, that because I shared the room with other three people from Gaza who were listening to Al Jazeera and whatever at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. And I woke up and I was like, who's listening to news at 7 a.m.? What's happening? I realized that something happening. And I started to see the news about Hamas invading Israel, killing, kidnapping people. And to be honest, at the first moment, I said it's Israeli propaganda. They are exaggerating what Hamas did so they can do whatever they want in Gaza. Or it's Hamas exaggerating what they did to show the people that we can break the IDF power image. I couldn't believe it. It was confusing with confusing media coming from here and there. One says Hamas killed 100 and one says that Hamas killed 1,000. It took some hours until one had somehow a clear image of what Hamas did that day. And to be honest, it was also shocking for me as a Gazan who lived with Hamas for 19 years. That was also shocking for me. Despite everything I saw from Hamas, whether from the coup of 2007 to my torture in 2019 and 2023, that was one thing, but seeing what Hamas did on that day was totally different thing. Until now, I spend much time seeing what Hamas did on that date with the GoPro cameras and the documentary. I still cannot comprehend how can a human being do that to another human being. And until now, I don't have a clear answer on how.
Do you phone your parents on that day to check they're okay? Do you speak to people at home, and what do they tell you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the immediate reaction is reaching out to the family. And I remember my father's first reaction when he told me they destroyed Gaza. We have to run. And my mother shared the same because we were not naive. We were first horrified by what Hamas did, and then we also realized the consequences coming for Gaza because Hamas kidnapped the Israeli soldier JRLive in 2006, and we saw the Israeli response to that. Hezbollah also kidnapped some Israelis, and Hezbollah himself said that if I knew that Israel's response will be that way, I would have never entered this war. And we also saw from Hamas's countless escalations. So we all knew that this will end up opening the gates of hell on the Gaza Strip. And that was why I urged my family to leave Gaza immediately. I told them from the first day to leave Gaza. And that was also the same with my friends who were all horrified by what Hamas did because yes, we have this conflict with Israel. We have much to say about Israel's military, about Israel's settlers, about the settlement movement, but we would never accept what Hamas did on that day, and we will never have the ability to endure the consequences of that on Gaza because we knew that Israel's response will never be a soft response.
What do you think Hamas thought Israel's response would be? And do you think that they themselves were shocked at how successful they were on the 7th of October?
I do think so. I don't think that Hamas thought that it will be that easy, to be honest, because still right now one thinks of what happened on October the 7th, and there is many questions that pop up to one's mind because Israel is known for its development technology, control, security, arms development. And the idea of Hamas invading Israel in such a way is still not acceptable, even until now for me. And I think even for Hamas's people themselves, because I think Hamas's leader, Mohammed Deif, said it himself that he said, and I'm quoting, sent 3,000 soldiers from Al Nukhba on that day. And if I knew if it's gonna be this way, I would have sent the 30,000. So Hamas's people themselves did not expect that quote unquote success in their terms about October the 7th. And it wasn't also only Hamas. There was other Gazans militias, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Mujahideen movement who kidnapped the Bebas children. So I think they did not expect that quote unquote success, and they themselves were shocked by what happened on that day. But that doesn't mean that Hamas did not understand the consequences of their planned, of their intent attack on Israel, because it was in their intention to kidnap, it was in their intention to kill people. And they did, because October the 7th was about two waves. One is the wave of the so-called Nukhba unit at the beginning, and then the other militias with some civilians from Gaza who entered to loot the Israeli homes. And the first wave of Hamas's 3,000 Nukhba militants kidnapped at least 50 people from Israel. So they also understood, or they are not that naive to not think of Israel's response to kidnapping 50 of their civilians from their homes and killing hundreds others.
What do you think Hamas thought would happen? Do you think they anticipated the ferocity of the Israeli response and the
Yes,
destruction that would follow?
yes, I do think that, and I'm uh, close to be sure actually about it because I spent much time listening to Hamas's statements, and if you went back to Yahya Sinwar's statements, it was part of his idea of this attack, and he described it actually in a previous media appearances, I think in 2022. And he said that his plan is to isolate Israel through international pressure on them. That was their only way to put some pressure on Israel. And if you went to other leaders like Fathi Hamad, who was an interior minister of Hamas, they all say the same. They all knew it, and they wanted to sacrifice the last Palestinian child to achieve what they achieved. And Yahya Sinwar has many media appearances where he describes that he understands how Israel's response is gonna be, and he is gonna fight until the quote last Palestinian child.
So, Rob, I feel like I've been monopolizing Hamza a lot, and I know you have some questions as well. Do you want to ask some questions, and then I'll come back with a few more before we go on to some of the questions that have been
Look,
brought to us
Howard,
by
don't feel
members of the
bad. I
audience?
monopolized him in Poland, so you've still got a way to go. Hamza, I'm sure you're going to get to it, but let's deal with it now. Currently, the situation is not good. You've spoken about your own upbringing, your own education. Um, in Poland, we had a bit of a wider discussion about you personally and why you weren't, or why you weren't eligible to join Hamas, and I'm sure that there are others as well. But I think you're in the minority. What is the way forward in terms of just education? How is there, while Hamas is in situ and it doesn't look like they're going anywhere, and I do want at some point in time for you to, on the webinar, discuss the factions that are rivaling Hamas and that are fighting Hamas and the abundance of weapons that are in Gaza. But with all of that in mind, how do you change the indoctrination with Hamas in situ? Or is the flat answer you just can't?
I mean, if Hamas is, continues to stay inside the Gaza Strip, it will never be there will never be a future, a peaceful future inside the Gaza Strip or with Israel next to us, and there will never be a new education for the Gazans as long as Hamas stays in power, because Hamas relies heavily on this indoctrination. I mean, to be a Hamas fighter, it goes through a very long process of indoctrination that includes indoctrination in schools and includes indoctrination after. So that will never happen as long as Hamas stays there.
Hamza, and okay, and touching on the factions, I know we spoke about factions fighting Hamas, and maybe you just want to give our listeners a view that it's not only Hamas there are oppositions to Hamas. Maybe you want to talk about their strength, who they supported by. You did touch on the fact that some of them assisted Israel in terms of locating bodies, etc., which I found to be very, very interesting indeed. And then, maybe if you could just also let our listeners know about how awash actually Gaza is and how easy it is to buy weapons in Gaza for the average Gazan.
Yeah, I mean, if we are to talk about the reality of the Gaza Strip right now, what happened inside the Gaza Strip is, instead of a two-state solution, it became a two-cities solution inside Gaza. One area, which is 48% controlled by Hamas and the other Palestinian militias like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Al Mujahideen. And one is controlled by the IDF, the Israeli army, and other anti-Hamas Israeli supported militias. We have until now, I think, five or six small groups of these militias that are there from the north to the south, distributed in many areas. The biggest one of them is staying in Rafah right now. It's named the Popular Forces, led by Yasser Abu Shabab and Ghassan al-Duhaini. And my problem with these militias is that many of them has very long criminal history inside the Gaza Strip. I mean, talking about Yasser Abu Shabab, he was a very big drug trafficker inside the Gaza Strip, and even his deputy right now, Ghassan al-Duhaini, was part of a small militia that emerged in Gaza before I left. It was called the Jaish al-Islam, which means the army of Islam, and it was very close to ISIS. And I think Ghassan is not an Islamist or an ISIS guy, but he was someone who was trying to benefit from these militias. Anyway, I my problem with these anti-Hamas militias is I also think of the day after. Okay, if we defeated and disarmed Hamas, who's going to disarm these militias? Because my problem with Hamas is not only because it's Hamas, but because it's a militia, and I don't think a state can be built with militias here and there. The state has to have the legitimate and the only use on the violence when necessary. That's what I think, at least what Max Weber sees. So this is stuck, and right now this is stuck because of the disarming process. The international society, with the Trump's plan, all supports disarming Hamas, and Hamas refuses to disarm. And the question of the process on how to demilitarize Hamas is not clear until now. Some thought it will be the international stabilization forces, but the international stabilization forces say that we are not interested in clashing with Hamas. We just secure the borders and etc. Keep in mind that this international stabilization forces is formed from Muslim countries, Indonesia, Azerbaijan, and the list goes on. So somehow it's understandable why they don't want to clash with Hamas, because they don't want much headache from the pro-Hamas parties.
Hamza, can you talk to us what Gaza looks like today? We see pictures of terrible destruction. How much of Gaza is destroyed? Talk to us about the issues of hunger and starvation. How real are those issues for the average Gazan? What winter is approaching now? How are people living? Talk to us about the human element and the human suffering that's taking place in Gaza at the moment.
Of course, I mean, the reality right now, according to the UN and others, that more than 80% of Gaza's civilian infrastructure was destroyed. That means 8 out of 10 homes were destroyed. So you can imagine how many people are displaced internally inside the Gaza Strip. We are talking about almost 1.9 million people displaced in tents. The vast majority of them are in tents. Others are staying in shelter schools. And those who are living in tents, including many of my friends, are living a catastrophic, humanitarian, disastrous situation. I'm talking about people who were living in tents for 2 years. You can imagine that those people did not see the term privacy, whether inside the tent that hosts all the family members or in the heavily crowded tents next to each other. Those people forget the term a toilet. You can imagine they did not use the toilet for 2 years. And I know that might sound naive, but no, it's real, it's serious. Those people did not see electricity. They did not see cooking gas. It feels that those people went back to the mid ages without anything to support them, and with that comes the infectional diseases for their children. And during the war, there was a period during the war. I wouldn't say all the war, but there was specific months during the war when Israel's government decided to stop all humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, including medicine, for 2 months and a few days. There was real starvation in Gaza. There was people who died of malnutrition, children who died of that, and I think there was many documented cases. And I myself, when I look to my friends who managed to escape Gaza after and to look on their bodies, it was clear to me how much of their weight they lost. So the starvation was real during the war, during parts of this war. Right now, the humanitarian situation is the same almost, but without the bombing and with more food. And unfortunately, there is even no security inside the streets itself, because you can imagine a city without police, with the criminals outside, without no law enforcement body, with the criminals and terrorists ruling over them.
So, much of what we know we see on social media, and we face with very conflicting images often. People suffering on the one side, but then I was watching today, someone walks into a supermarket and it's fully stocked and the shelves are fully stocked, and there are people in restaurants sitting there smoking hookah and having shish kebabs. Are those two sides of the same coin? Like any society, is there the wealthies that have, and probably the Hamas leadership who have access to all of that, and a group of people who have access to nothing?
Actually, I know about those places, and you can find them actually in some places of the Gaza Strip, depends mostly to between the center and the south. But I would assure you that the vast majority of Gazans can't afford the prices in these places. It's crazily high prices. And keep in mind that the Gazans life stopped for the Gazans from October the 7th. They do not work. There is no normal jobs. So the vast majority do not even earn money so they can go to these places. They are relying on humanitarian aid, on donations, on support coming from the outside. But I would assure you that these are limited for corrupt Hamas members, leaders, supporters, and some people who collected donations in the name of supporting Gazans, and now they are using it for these purposes.
So before we go on to deal with some of those stories that we hear, stories of corruption and UNRWA and etc., I want to touch on your parents because you spoke about your parents. You urged them to get out because you knew what was going to happen after the 7th of October. You had a pretty good idea what the Israeli response was going to look like. What happened to your parents? And you have brothers as well. You have brothers who are engineers, if I remember correctly. Where are all your family today?
Yeah, so unfortunately, yes, I had this good idea, but my father did not listen immediately to it, and it was hesitant because leaving your country like for and I think he assumed for a long time is not an easy decision to make, and yeah, he stayed there, and with parts of my family, there was another part who were studying in Egypt already before the war. But the part of my family was also there during the war in my family house, and they stayed there until I remember the before the Rafah operation actually. And because of my activism when I was in Greece, I wrote an article for Newsweek media outlet in the US titled "Message to the Gazans: Demand the release of the Israeli hostages, if not out of moral clarity, at least to save whatever is left from Gaza." And back then, Hamas's militants went to my family who were living in a tent in the south because they left my home in a Rimal neighborhood and threatened them because of this article. That was something big to Hamas to write such an article. And from that moment, I told my family that, okay, now you have the war and you have Hamas, both against you. And I tried to collect money for them because leaving was also needed money to bribe the Egyptians. And unfortunately, the Egyptians demanded at least $5,000 for each person. And also, this is a big money for in Gaza. And my family did not have that money back then, and I started collecting donations actually from the outside for the first time of in my life to ask for donations just to get my family out. And thankfully, I managed to get them out before the Rafah operation, and now they are staying in Egypt until one has a clear answer about Gaza.
I I think people will be very surprised because we were always told that the Egyptian border is completely sealed. You can't get in or out. But I think what you're telling us with the right amount of money that the gates of that border are open.
Exactly. I mean, my father, because of his job as a consultant, used to travel at least once or twice a year.
So if I can run you through very briefly many of the stories that you hear that we hear, and you tell us kind of true, false, or give a comment. But the one story we often hear is that Gaza was a concentration camp before the war. You lived there. How
I
accurate
mean,
is that statement?
I think whoever uses this term to describe Gaza does not have any idea what a concentration looks like. I urge him to take a trip like I did with Rob and go and see what a concentration camp looks like.
Then we have the comment that UNRWA has really made all matters worse, and UNRWA education has really brought up a generation of jihadists. True or false?
No, that's an exaggeration, actually. That I actually by the way I received 3 years of education inside the UNRWA schools, and that wasn't the case. I have other criticism for UNRWA, but I think this is a mere exaggeration. That doesn't mean that some Hamas militants were working inside UNRWA. That's a fact, actually. But unfortunately, this is Gaza's reality, is that Hamas was a cancer in Gaza. They spread everywhere. They found some members of Hamas working at Reuters. They found some of them, one of them doing the son of a Hamas leader doing an interview with or a documentary with the BBC. One of them working with Doctors Without Borders. So the issue is not limited to UNRWA. It's limited to Hamas, who did not miss any place.
A next thing that we often hear, Hamas wants the destruction of Israel. Is that correct?
Yes, Hamas wants the destruction not only of Israel, but anyone who stands against a big Islamic state. Because for those who don't know, Hamas is a political Islamist movement, part of the Muslim Brotherhood and influenced by the Iranian regime or the Iranian revolution. As a political Islamist movement, the term nationalism does not apply to those people. Those people do not believe in nations, they believe in a big Islamic state. So for them, as actually the co-founder of Hamas, Mahmoud al-Zahar, said in a recorded interview that Hamas's project is not about Palestine. We have a bigger project, and he pointed his finger to the map when he was talking about it. And he was talking about the big Islamic state.
Next thing that we often hear is it's all about Qatar, and it's about Qatari money supporting this grand vision of a big Islamic state as well. True or false?
It's not only Qatar, but I would also add that you can never hate the Qatari regime as you should, I think, because it's not only Hamas, but what they do in the entire Middle East. I mean, I can talk hours about how Qatar is, for example, lobbying and influencing the US and promoting and glorifying terrorists. That did not stop with Hamas. They supported they continue to at least to work as a propaganda machine for Hezbollah, for Al-Houthi in Yemen, for the militants in Iraq, poisoning the Western society by getting some of their journalists, media influencers, and even the academia of the US that they infiltrated, whether we are talking about Columbia University or others. So I think the influence of the Qatar regime is massive, but Hamas also relied on the support from the Iranian regime, the support of the Turkish regime, and other Arabic states.
Do you believe that there was an Iranian conspiracy to surround Israel with proxy armies as part of its plan for Israel's destruction?
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's a public plan. Actually, they are not hiding it anymore. And yeah, I think this was always their plan. They were public about it. And even until now, they are trying as much as they can to rebuild what was destroyed of Hezbollah and Hamas, to try to rebuild them so they can have this access again, because the Iranian regime does not want to do the quote unquote sacrifice himself. He wants to push others to do this sacrifice for him to attack and quote unquote eliminate Israel.
Then talk to us about corruption. We hear that the Hamas regime, at least the political leadership, live in 5- and 7-star hotels in Qatar. How bad is the corruption within the Palestinian society, within both the Palestinian Authority and within Hamas?
Actually, it's worse than one can imagine. I mean, if you are talking about Hamas, I mean, I will give you the example of Yahya Sinwar after he was released in 2019, because Yahya Sinwar, for those who don't know, was jailed in Israel for 20 years, and he was released as part of the JRLive prisoners deal. And Yahya Sinwar did not have anything when he was released from Israel's prison. He was there for 20 years. He did not have anything in Gaza. He was living in the south in Khan Yunis. And after he was released, he bought a villa next to my house in a Rimal neighborhood. He opened a Sinwar suites. He opened a Sinwar for hijab, a Sinwar hijab dresses, a Sinwar for money exchange, a Sinwar restaurant. That was all in between just 2019 and 2023. And those two parties, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, they are massively corrupt. Those people, it's beyond reparation, I guess. I mean, this is why I don't believe when they talk about the reform of the Palestinian Authority. Without the necessary pressure, the Palestinian Authority should be dismantled and built again, because I think they tried to reform and change some of this corruption, but every time they fail, because I think it's in the system itself.
Then, Rob, I want to bring you back, because I think we need to talk about some of the things in the Western reaction to Hamas that's maybe a little confusing. So you have Queers for Palestine, who seem to be a big movement around the world. Does that surprise you? How are gay and lesbian people dealt with within the Palestinian society and within the Hamas-controlled region?
I mean, in the Hamas-controlled regions, I mean, of course, it's not an option for someone to be publicly part of the LGBT community. I mean, when Fathi Hamad was an interior minister, I mean, it was even hard for just a guy and a woman to work together without being family related to each other. That was a reason for arresting Gaza, and so yes, this is one thing. I of course Hamas will execute them in a very bad way if they catch some of those people. But on the other hand, I was happy, to be honest. I was happy to see some support for the Palestinian civilians from this movement, and yeah, I'm happy to see a support from them for the civilians in Gaza. Of course, if they support Hamas, then the term that Netanyahu used, "chicken for KFC," would apply.
Rob, you have some comments about like some of the
Yeah,
university, the
sure.
liberal university
Sure,
views,
exactly,
and
Howard. Thank you. So, Hamza, we've seen a wave of support across Western capitals, um, Ivy League universities, literally stretching from North America all the way down to the southern tip of Australia. Does this support surprise you? Is it, in your opinion, and I know that you're a peace activist and well versed on the subject, is it more pro-Palestinian, more anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, or a combination thereof?
Actually, to start with, I was surprised, to be honest, by this massive support that went after October the 7th. I mean, talking about the US, it was never in the US history that you will find among the Republicans more than 50% support of recognizing Palestine as a part of two-state solution. Even looking here in Germany, you would never find a support for a two-state solution, a majority support. Now we are talking about more than 60% in Germany. So I think the support that came after October the 7th was never there before. This is something unprecedented and big. This is one thing about whether they are pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, or pro-Hamas. I think they can give better answer with their actions, I guess. I mean, I would say that my answer would differ depending on where you are asking me in the US or Europe or whatever. But I think there is many parts who are anti-Israel, coming from, the leftist dictionary of anti-colonialism. So this is how they see it. And there is some parts who are proudly, publicly glorifying, chanting, and supporting Hamas. And you have, I think, the third part who genuinely want this war to stop and to have a better solution. Now, the question is, after all what we saw, the question is for the pro-Palestine movement, because I think in the meantime they are empty. There is no clear vision of what they want to achieve right now. And I think this is a question for them to ask, okay, what kind of solidarity do we want to do for the Palestinians? What are our agenda to support the Palestinians? Because chanting in the street or in the university or blocking whatever student from getting here or harassing this student there, that will not support us. That will never do anything good for the Palestinians. Actually, it will harm more than benefits us. So it's for them to develop the agenda of how and yeah, how to support the Palestinians.
so, Hamza, before we get on to how do we solve the problem, because we want to talk about solutions as well, before we get on to that, I want to talk about the South African government. Because the South African government sees itself as a bastion of liberation and revolution and sympathy for the Palestinian people. We did learn on about the 16th of October, I think it was, that our then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Naledi Pandor, called Hamas to congratulate them on the success of the Al Aqsa flood operation.
That was
Sorry?
who was that?
Our Minister of Foreign Affairs,
Of
South Africa.
oh,
And in fact, in December of 2023, the ruling party in South Africa, the African National Congress, invited Hamas to South Africa, hosted them in Parliament, and hosted them in the head offices of the African National Congress in South Africa. It seems for a society based on human rights, one that's gone through a liberation movement where we believe in things like human rights and liberty and freedom of expression, it seems a little odd to me that South Africa would be doing that. So I want to give you an opportunity maybe to give a message to South Africa about how do you support the Palestinian people while not supporting the great abuses, the dictatorship, the torture that Hamas has subjected on yourself and so many of the Palestinian people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually surprised because I didn't know that before our event. Yeah, if I would have a simple message to them is, do not let your hater to Israel close your eyes to the extent that you are willing to support whatever terrorist militia that can harm them. That is by no way is a way to support Palestinians. This is actually how you support the oppressor of the Palestinian. This is also how you support a group that, I mean, they unleashed terror on us as Palestinians from 2007. They killed hundreds of us and they continued and killing, torturing, executing until 2023. And they are even doing it they did it during the war and they are doing it right now. So I myself and the vast majority of Gazans right now, we protested during the war more than once with just two simple demands. We want to overthrow Hamas and we want this war to stop. This is what they called for in more than 10 protests during the war. So my message to this government is to listen to the people who were enduring bombardment, displacement, starvation, and when they decided to protest, that was their message to you. You can go to the videos online and to listen to the message yourself and to listen to us as a Gazans, because I would tell you, as if they are listening to me, if you are support, we will never have a better future as long as Hamas continues to stay there. Yes, you can be against the occupation, you can be against the Israeli policies, the government. I myself call them war criminals, from Netanyahu to Smotrich, but that by no way means supporting Hamas.
So we recently have had two aeroplanes of Palestinian refugees arriving in South Africa. It would appear that they paid about $2,000 a person to escape Gaza and were flown to South Africa. South Africa has said they don't want any more Palestinian refugees in South Africa, and they've called escaping refugees, they said this is ethnic cleansing. Do you have any advice? Should we permit Palestinians who wish to leave Gaza and escape the destruction? Should we call that ethnic cleansing? Should we deny them residence in South Africa or refugee status in South Africa? What advice would you give us?
I mean, yeah, one doesn't. I don't want to make comparisons so people don't understand it in a bad way, but yeah, I don't know under which moral standard keeping people trapped inside a war under bombardment and killing is better than taking them to a safer haven where they can have a better life. Everyone in this world should have the freedom of movement. I think this is something that is not controversial. And yeah, I think I don't, as I said, I don't want to make the comparisons, but we can also remember how when Jews were escaping the Holocaust, what one is still thinking about those who refused to receive these refugees while they were escaping death. And yeah, I think everyone should have the freedom of movement to go wherever he wants, to leave whatever war space he needs. But I think the controversy I think that happened is that the South African government was not informed, I guess, with that those people are coming. So I think it's the story has a bit some details to to dismantle. But in general, I would say I'm always supportive of anyone who receives Gazan refugees. I myself am a refugee, and I'm thankful that I don't know actually if to say thankful because Germany now wants to deport me, but I'm also thankful that at least for some time I was hosted here and I was granted a place where I was escaping. I was escaping less horrors than that. I was only escaping Hamas's horrors without talking about the war. So I can't imagine how is it for the people who are staying there. This is I'm sorry, it's just one last sentence. This is when if you want to not to accept this if these people, this is when slogans control your mind more than your moral compass, more than your humanity. I myself, if I saw someone who's needs help in the street, of course I will help him. I cannot go back home and still thinking how I left this one to suffer outside.
Rob, you've got a question, and then we need to
Yeah,
talk about
sure.
how do we solve this problem.
Yeah, Hamza, we've had a lot of questions from our webinar. I want to quote Middle East Uncovered for our listeners. Middle East Uncovered is a very, very insightful journal on the Middle East, and Hamza is a contributor to it. And on the October 14th edition on Middle East Uncovered, you wrote, "All living hostages are finally home. It feels unreal to even say that after everything. May those who survived find healing, and may we never see such captivity again." How do we resolve this conflict such that your hope and prayers come true?
Oh, I always dream that I have this magic trick, to solve the conflict immediately. But I think many, as I said, I don't claim to have this magical solution. But in my opinion, many things has to change so this conflict can be solved. One of them is first and foremost to talk about the not the negotiators, but the supposed to be mediators of this conflict, because in this conflict we have only the US as a mediator, which leans mostly towards Israel, and of course Israel is way stronger technologically and politically than Palestine. So when they even start negotiations, they are not on the same levels. This is one. So we need the something to make the balance in the negotiation to somehow make it a balanced negotiation. Second, we need also yeah. So second, we need the compromise because you cannot solve such a cycle without breaking the taboos. For us, the Palestinians, for example, you have the right of return, which is a legitimate right, but it can never be applied in such a vision of 7 million Palestinians going to live in Israel, and the same goes for Israel. So you have to break these taboos and to start making compromises to the other side. This is the second. And we have also to, as a Palestinian, I always think of how to dismantle the idea that spreads among right-wing Israelis that Palestinian state will be a security threat to us. So for us as a Palestinian to work on this part and to manage to convince and reshape the opinion of Israelis that a Palestinian threat will not be a security threat to Israel, because Gaza was not a peace plan, but it could have been a good example of how a Palestinian state can be. Unfortunately, Hamas destroyed that. So it's on our responsibilities to do that. And also on the Israeli side to start seeing the Palestinians as a normal state living next to them, not as a security threat. Because at the end of the day, Israel also had these imaginations about Egypt, then they did the peace treaty. They had it up with Jordan and they had the peace treaty. So we also need that inside Gaza. We need more compromises from Israel, stopping the settlement movement and the hardships they are imposing on the people in the West Bank, checkpoints, roads, whatever, because this all takes the belief of these people that Israel wants to have a shared future with them. And also to support the moderate, or in Israel's view, the less radical party, which is the Palestinian Authority, because if you want support such parties, you have to show the Palestinians that I can support the moderate, but I will never support the radical. Unfortunately, what we saw with Netanyahu's government is quite the opposite. Netanyahu supported the radical on the hope of this destroying the Palestinian state, or sidelining the Palestinian liberation of the PLO. So we have also to kind of support the moderate. These are some ideas that can be part of how we can solve the conflict.
I want to maybe potentially talk about more concrete ideas. We're in the process of a ceasefire at the moment. Do you have a sense that that ceasefire is going to hold? We've seen a lot of violence within that ceasefire, within Palestinian society, within people crossing over the yellow line. Will Hamas be disarmed, and can we move to phase two? What's your assessment?
I mean, from my understanding to Hamas's ideology, I think disarming them voluntarily is never gonna happen. And what we're gonna see in the future is long-term Israeli presence in Gaza, Israeli army presence in Gaza. And I don't think any of the extreme right-wing dreams of settlements and occupying Gaza is gonna happen, but we will have a presence of the Israeli army inside the Gaza Strip. And what they will do, in my opinion, is to take over step by step the neighborhoods of the remaining parts of Gaza and not do the mistake that they did during the war, which is clearing one area, then leaving it, then Hamas can go back through the tunnels to this area. I think they will have more presence in these areas until they can completely disarm Hamas.
So, as part of almost a roadmap to peace, and if you've got another 5 or 6 minutes to give us, I don't know what your time's looking like, Hamza. If you've got, give advice to the Israelis and give advice to the Palestinians. Maybe 3 or 4 points each that will help us get on a roadmap to a more permanent, peaceful coexistence between the two people.
I mean, for the Palestinians, I would start with saying that taboos and slogans don't make a state and they will never do. And it's legitimate to look at Zionism for what it did to the Palestinians, but it would also be good to look at Zionism on what it achieved for their own people. Because unlike Pan-Arabism and Islamism, Zionism managed to have a state for their own people. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to learn from that and to develop from that. And yeah, I mean it's lots of actually of advices that I can give, but going to the Israeli side, to look at the spike of radicalization that is happening in Israeli society since this government came to power, because there is a horrifying spike of radicalism happening in Israeli society since the current coalition came to power. And as I said, to drop on the idea that a Palestinian state will always be a security threat and that the solution is more occupation and more settlements. Yeah, I think those are pretty the simple advices that I have to the two societies.
I want to make sure that if anyone has a question, that you please post it right now, whether you're watching us on Zoom, on Facebook, or on YouTube, so we can bring those questions through to Hamza as we come towards the end of this. I also want to ask those people who are watching us on YouTube tonight to please press that like and subscribe button. That really helps us communicate with you and allows us to notify you of more webinars similar to this evening's webinar as well. But Hamza, there are some questions that we have. For example, how many people have your sort of perspective? Are you a lone voice in the wilderness? Or are there many, many Palestinians who are desirous of peace, who see a peaceful potential outcome to all of this, who are willing to take the sort of stand that you have taken so publicly and so very bravely? And I also want to ask people who are watching us this evening to just thank you for the brave statements that you've made, for the stands that you've taken, to really go and progress both the Palestinian people and the cause of peace as we go forward. So if you have a message for Hamza as well, please post that message now. But are you a lone voice in the wilderness?
Yeah, I mean, I want actually to go for one of the last comments actually on our Zoom, who says not a single soul in Gaza was against the massacre of 7th of October until today. by saying that this dehumanization and demonizing language always leads to catastrophes, always leads to this is just a genocide language, to be honest. I very rarely use this term, but when I see such statements, I would say that this is exactly the language of a genocidal mind. And I genuinely urge you to rethink about it. Now, going about Hamza, I don't think I'm the only figure in Palestinian society who talks about peace. I think there is many talk about peace, but many lost hope of what of the 77 years or the 78 years or how they can achieve this peace. I don't think we are the vast majority right now because many dropped on that hope, especially after this catastrophic war also in Gaza. But the question is not how much, is the question of how to push others actually to join this camp of believing in peace and two-state solution by showing them that modernity can get an achievement for the Palestinians. By showing them, for example, Israel has many ways to do that. If to say, for example, in the West Bank, they did not see cases of terrorism for years, 2 years or three. To start saying we are dismantling the settlements from here, we are not going to build illegal settlements inside this area, to start giving the Palestinians that hope, because unfortunately we dropped. Many of us stopped believing that Israel wants, or the Israeli government wants to share this land with us.
So, Hamza, there are concerns that people have about you personally, about your safety, about the fact that you tell us that Germany wants to deport you. Tell us what you're going through personally at this moment, and how is it possible that someone with as important voice as yourself, a voice of peace, is maybe facing deportation from Germany?
Yeah, I mean it's a long story, but before I came to Germany, I passed through Greece, and my plan was always Greece, to stay there and to have my life in Europe from scratch, and not attached to this conflict in any way. But because of my activism in Greece, and there is a very large radical, extremely radical pro-Palestine camp there, I was attacked and threatened because of my opinions. So my decision was, after the second threat, immediately decided to come to Germany. And because of the bureaucratic procedures here, they say that the Dublin law says that the first European country you pass is responsible for you. So I try to tell them that it's not safe. I was attacked. There is reports, and I'm publicly known with my own views. I'm pretty sure it will not be the last time I will be harassed with. But unfortunately, because of these bureaucratic laws and the current, you know, move against the migration worldwide, I'm having this deportation letter, and I was supposed to leave the country in June and go to Greece. I couldn't go because I don't have the documents with me. I don't have the means for that. So right now I'm just waiting to maybe Germany rethinks its decision, or most probably I will go back to Greece.
How do you survive on a day by day basis?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, I stay in a random refugee camp because people think that we're frauding my comments with that I'm a Mossad agent living in Tel Aviv. I live in a refugee camp, and also all the time with my events here, I always have security. We always talk to the police, and we have connections to the police. I made more than 20 events here in 1 year, and I don't remember one time we did events without police presence. And yeah, normally just avoid the streets that are known to be radical in German's capital.
So, if we were to ask a final question, it's a question of hope. Do you have hope for the future, for solving the problem? Do you have hope for the Palestinian people? Do you have hope for yourself and your family personally?
Yes, I do. I know it might sound French to say that in such a time, in such circumstances, but I do have the hope. Uh, yeah, I do have a hope that some change will happen in regards of Gaza, in regards of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in general, and I think there is a huge interest, if one can say, worldwide to reach whatever reconciliation between those two countries, because I think the world also is sick of us because of the countless times we fight each other. So I think there is a push, whether we are talking about Trump, and call me crazy, but I'm thankful that Trump is there right now. For one reason is that he's the one who managed to pressure Netanyahu. I don't think we would have reached this ceasefire with Biden in power. And I also think that the Gulf interest in reshaping Gaza and then having their normalization agreements with Israel will somehow reshape the region, and it will be in the benefit of the Palestinians and in the benefit of the Gazans. And hopefully that will mean my safe return with my family to Gaza instead of staying in Greece or Germany.
Okay. Rob, just a huge thank you for this introduction and for getting Hamza to agree to spend his evening with us this evening. Hamza, it's been a truly inspiring evening. It really has been. And I think when you read so many of the comments that have come through, and I'll send them through to you afterwards, I think people really truly appreciate the bravery that you've shown and the important voices for peace. And the more voices we can elevate of people who want to solve the problem rather than perpetuate the problem, the more people that we can get to break down stereotypes and to see each other as humans, the greater chance that we have of solving everything for all of our benefits. For the benefits of the Jewish people, for the benefits of the Israeli people, for the benefits of the Palestinian people, and for the benefits of the Muslim people around the world as well. This has been a conflict that has gone on for much too long. And for those people who keep on throwing up saying you can't speak to the other side, there's something in conflict, and I have a master's in conflict resolution called mirror imaging in conflict. Every side sees the other side in the exact same way. And as long as we think there's no partner for peace on the other side, we are going to condemn ourselves to perpetual war. Let's rather look way beyond all the rhetoric, and let's see the humanity in each of us, and let's actually try and make a difference to solve all of this. Hamza, you've been so generous with your time this evening. May this be the first of many times we get to chat, and the first of many times we actually take a foot forward in order to try solve the problem.
Yes, hopefully next time in person.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you so much for organizing this.
Pleasure.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
We'll see you again soon. Cheers.
Good night.
Bye bye. Good night.
Bye.